Hello and welcome everybody to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and we are going to talk about how to get you hired. That is the entire purpose of this show. This is an interactive live stream. So if you're seeing my face, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of my face. And I would encourage you to get in there and ask me questions. Ask me what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with. With obviously the point of this being to get hired by any means necessary. There's more than one way to find a job. There's the way that most people end up talking about, which is going through a recruiter after answering a job ad, responding with a job application, and then talking to a bunch of people you've never seen before who mistrust you, sometimes in multiple rounds, and eventually they give you an offer. That's been talked about extensively. There's also many other methods. So if you're wondering about those, we can get into those too. The title of today's episode of How to Get Hired is called How to Introduce Yourself / What Are Your Strengths? Best Answer. So we're going to be covering both of those questions. First, we're going to be talking about what are your strengths? The best answer to that question. This is a very important question because you kind of need to have an answer to this, no matter what situation you're in, because people are going to be wondering what your value is and what you can contribute. And that is true across the board, not just in a situation where you're trying to get hired. However, at every stage of the hiring process, you need to have a good answer for this. And your answer is going to change depending on who your audience is. That's the part that a lot of people don't get. Okay, so until we get a ton of questions, I'm going to start by answering these. So you go to a job interview and you get asked, what are your strengths? They put you on the spot with this pointed question, right? And you're wondering what to say. Now let's get into it because there's several principles at play when you get asked this question. Where to start? Let's see. How about something that a lot of younger people and people that are new to the whole job interview thing, something that they struggle with and that might not be apparent to them, and that is that strengths are relative. That means that everybody's going to have their own opinion on what's a strength and what isn't. For example, if you have, I'm sure, something about yourself that you're proud of, that you consider a strength, maybe it's a personality trait, maybe it's an accomplishment, maybe it's some education or experience that you have, right? And you are particularly proud of this. A lot of your sense of self-worth comes from this. And so naturally, when somebody asks you, what are your strengths? You feel a desire to immediately talk about this thing. The problem is that how do you know that that specific thing that you've said is what the other party is looking for, what they consider a strength? Let me give you an example. Let's say you work fast. Okay, now, all things being equal, this is a good trait, right? Working fast. However, perhaps you're talking to someone who really places a high priority on the quality of work, and they don't really care exactly how fast you are as long as the work is error-free, right? So this is the person that you're talking to. Now, you've never met them before. You don't know their personality. You don't know their preferences. And they say, what are your strengths? And you say, oh, well, I'm a really fast worker. And what they hear is, oh, I go so fast that I don't put any particular care into what I do. I prioritize speed over quality and accuracy. And so you think this is a strength, you're proud of it, and they hear a weakness. And unfortunately, that was the first impression that you made. That was it. That was your chance. You said a bad thing. And so consequently, they're not very impressed with you, right? So this is a problem. Strengths are relative. What you see as a strength may not be what somebody else sees as a strength, depending on their personality or their background or what specifically they're looking for, right? And that's one factor that really complicates this question, right? For example, I mean, to give you a very obvious example, you go to a job interview and they say, what are your strengths? And you say, oh, well, I'm very handsome. Right? Now, maybe the interviewer doesn't care about that, right? So they think, fail, right? That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that, you're very professional, or that you have all these accomplishments, or that you take great pride in your work, or that your ambition is to make it in this industry. So you're very driven and you're very interested to learn and all this kind of stuff. I would have accepted any of those answers. I didn't regard your answer as particularly good. You're handsome. What the hell does that matter? This is an accounting department. Being handsome is not necessarily something that accountants care about. I'm just kidding, but not really. Yeah, I see there's 26 people here. Thank you for joining me today. If you guys have any questions, get in the chat. Let me know what you're struggling with, what you're wondering about, and I will help you out. Okay, so we are answering the question, what are your strengths? When you're asked this, what's the best answer? Okay, so hopefully I framed the problem for you by illustrating that principle. Okay, the question is, what can you say that this other person asking you the question will consider a strength? Right? Do we have to guess what they place value on? Well, no, you want to try and avoid doing that. Okay? So let me just jump to the heart of this. Usually a good thing to say is something that you know they care about. Now, how do you know what they care about if you've never met them before? Well, they have produced a job posting that you've responded to, and on the job posting, they've explained what the job is, and usually a list of requirements. They're looking for somebody with these particular requirements. So obviously, having those things is presumably what they would consider to be good, right? So if they say, we're looking for somebody that has 5 years experience in this, or they have this skill, or they have this education. Now, presumably, if they asked you, what are your strengths? And you said, well, what I consider to be my strengths are that, first of all, I have this particular education, and I have 5 years experience doing this particular type of work, and I have this skill. Excuse me as I slap my microphone around, as I make my microphone my bitch. Right? So if you already know that they're looking for these, presumably, them hearing that you have these is a good thing. They'll regard that as a good thing, right? So when you are faced with a blank slate, a good thing to fall back on are the posted requirements of the job, right? That's probably the safest thing you can fall back on. Now, there are other options. For example, universal traits that it's a fairly safe bet that they would regard these as good. You don't know for a fact, but presumably they would. Like, for example, conducting yourself in a professional manner, understanding what is appropriate conduct for the workplace and what isn't. These would probably be good, right? It's very rare that people don't place any particular value on these things. Now, whether it's their highest priority or not is open to debate, but would they consider these a strength? It's a very safe bet that they would, right? Passion for your job, that would be another one of these, right? That it's a pretty safe bet. Okay, so that helps hopefully frame an answer. So my recommendation would be, if you sit down in the job interview, you don't know the other person, it's early in the interview process, you have no idea what makes them tick, what they place priority on, I would gravitate to the job requirements. That would be a good starting point. Now, if they want to ask you about specific other things, that's fine. They can state specifically what they want to know about, and then you can answer those questions. But just this open-ended question, what are your strengths? I would start with something very safe like that and very pertinent. Yeah, now, some other sort of principles or factors that come up when you're dealing with this question, things that I've heard are, let's see, I've tried to write them all down here, and I'm having problems reading my own notes, full disclosure. That's how professional I am. Sometimes people have an issue because what they stated in the job description, they said, we're looking for someone who has this, right? And you're a bit self-conscious because either you don't have that or you don't technically have that. What do you say? Do you avoid mentioning? Do you avoid any mention of that in the interview, hoping that they'll not bring it up and then won't discover that you don't actually have that, right? Is that the way to go? What if you don't have the thing? Bill, you said go down the job requirements. I have this, I have this, I have this. What if you don't have those, right? Well, here's the deal. Here's what's going on. You don't know when they created the job posting and they said that these 10 things or whatever are a requirement. You don't know if those are actually requirements, meaning it's a show-stopping deal breaker if you don't have it, or it's not technically a requirement. It's a nice to have, but it's not the end of the world if you don't actually literally have that thing. Okay? You don't know. All you know is that they said that we're looking for someone who has all of these. Okay? So if you get to the job interview and you're worried because technically a couple of the things that they said they wanted, you don't have, you don't have to worry, because the fact that they called you in for the interview signals to you that on paper, they consider you to be technically qualified. Okay? It is a waste of time for them to call someone down to an interview that on paper doesn't seem to be qualified. It looks like they can't do the job. If you're hiring for a medical doctor, as an extreme example, to do brain surgery, right? A rocket scientist or a brain surgeon to do brain rocketry. The problem is if you submitted a resume and it doesn't say anywhere on there that you have a medical degree, a degree in medicine, or are a fully qualified doctor, they're probably not going to call you in for an interview, right? It would be a waste of time to talk to someone who isn't a medical doctor and interview them for this job as a rocket surgeon or brain rocketist. And it wouldn't make any sense, right? So the fact that you're at the interview, that signals to you, and that suggests that on paper, assuming that nothing on your resume is a fabrication or a lie, you're qualified, right? So don't be too self-conscious about not quite having everything on their list. All they want to know is that everything on that list, it's not going to be a problem. Okay, so if they said, I want 5 years experience in this, and you're worried because you don't have 5 years experience, you got 2 years experience, don't worry about it. All they want to know is that, that issue, the experience of how to do this particular thing, that's not going to be a problem that's going to arise once they give you the job. Okay? I'm just going to finish this question before we go to questions. It's great that you guys are participating. We're getting some questions. I'm looking forward to answering those in a second. Now, because I get asked all this stuff, I've sort of written down the deal here. Now, so that's all well and good, but I've been asked okay, well, Bill, how do you answer the question? If they said on their job posting that they want someone with 5 years experience in this role before, and let's say you only have 1 year experience with this role, how do you answer the question when they ask you about it? If they call you on this, okay, here's what you can do. You can substitute experience for experience, or you can substitute education for experience, right? Or you could substitute vice versa, experience for education. Right? So if they say we're looking for someone who has this qualification and you don't have that, but you have some experience that would be relevant, you can say, well, I don't actually have that, but what I do have is I have this experience, which has seen me work in the role and have to deal with any scenario that you would expect to come up in that role. And I've already done that. I already know how to deal with it. And so I'm not particularly concerned about how I'm going to perform on the job because I have done this type of thing before. Something like that, where you're substituting experience for education, or vice versa, or one type of experience for another. Or another little handy thing I've heard that's good is if someone says, how many years experience have you done this? Or how much experience do you have in this? And you can say, well, I only have 1 year experience in that. However, I have worked with many coworkers that have 20 years experience in that. and I've never had an issue holding my own and performing the same as them in the same work scenarios as they encounter. So I'm not particularly concerned about that. I think I can certainly hold my own when it comes to doing this job. Something like that, right? So you can substitute experience for experience. Okay. And one final thing, if I can decipher what I've written here, which is pretty hard. See, I've written a text file, and all the text is all bunched together. And it's all in shorthand, which is really helpful. I should really stop doing this to myself. Okay, if you're going for an entry-level job, you have one other option, and that is when they say, what are your strengths? You can also pull out soft skills. You don't have to necessarily go to experience that you have, or education you have, or an accomplishment you have. Okay, you can also talk about soft skills, or traits. Like, for example, if you have great attention to detail, and the job most likely requires attention to detail, it's good to say that. You say, I have a personality, I'm a very detail-oriented person. I really focus on the details, and I take it seriously. Accuracy is extremely important. And so you can also say that in response to this question. You can pull out a personality trait, or a soft skill, like I have good communication skills, I've had experience presenting, so I know how to do a presentation, this kind of thing. That's an advantage I bring to this role. The problem with this, though, is that you have to guess as to which trait or soft skill that they would want to hear, right? What they see as valuable. So there's a little bit of a stretch there. Otherwise, that's how I'd recommend you answer this question. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. That's how I'd recommend you answer when someone says, what's your greatest strength? Or what is your strength? Or what are your strengths? Bottom line, go down the job requirements as listed on the job posting. And yes, you can bring that to a job interview. You can have it on the table. Don't be face down like this, reading it like that. Just to glance at. What can help is if you've highlighted the key words, all the different requirements. So when you get down there, you make sure, if possible, that you have all of those, right? Those would be talking points. Okay, so that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's go over to questions. I see there's 28 of you guys here. Thank you for joining me today. Respectful Human says, is there any difference between an online and an in-person job interview? In substance, no. No, it's the same questions they could ask. It's the same responses you would give. It's the same general type of behavior you would exhibit, and all the rest of it. The only differences are cosmetic. They're to do with, if you're doing like a Zoom call or something like that, or Microsoft Teams, or, whatever telecommunication software you use. It's just specifics to do with that software. Excuse me. That's the only real difference. So being familiar with the software, having used it before, really helps. What I'd recommend is that you try it out. If you're not super familiar with it, try it out. If you possibly can, have like a call or something between you and a friend or a family member just to test it. Make sure your sound is good, that they can hear what you're saying. Place the microphone close to you for maximum clarity. Don't have it super far away. Place the camera in such a way that it looks flattering and relatively close. You don't want to be a dot, in the horizon. You want to be someone they can see clearly. And just that kind of stuff. I've done videos on that kind of stuff. A lot of other people have done videos on that. There's other resources too to help you deal with the mechanical software issues. If you can use wired networking instead of Wi-Fi, that can help. Although today that's mattering less and less as connections get faster and stuff. Try and do it on a computer or larger device rather than a phone, if possible. It's not always possible. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. What you say is pretty much the same. Okay. The only element is that people sometimes behave a little bit differently when they're on camera as opposed to being in person. So there's little minor differences of behaviors that you may see the other person doing or that you may want to do that differ than when you're in person. But they're minor. It's really like if you can do an in-person interview, usually you can do an online interview without much kerfuffle. Right? Just be familiar with the software, know the basics, and you'll do fine. Horseflesh89 says, should you inform your employer of your kleptomania at interview or at stock take asking for a friend? Okay, friend, I like that. No, Horseflesh, that was from Time Bandits, right? I remember that because that was a character that was mentioned. And if you look at the credits, it's played by a person, but they don't actually appear in the movie. So they were left on the cutting room floor or something. Okay, sort of the blanket answer to this is no. Okay. The whole point of you going down to a job interview, presumably, is to get the job, right? Technically, the point, the goal of any part of this process is to get to the next stage in the process. So the whole point of submitting an application or a resume is to get an interview. And then the whole point of what your goal is at the interview is to get to the next round of interviews or to get the offer, right? If there's only one round. And then the whole point of the offer is to get the job, right? So that's the only thing you should be focused on, right? And I understand where you're coming from, or at least I believe I do. You want to get there and you want to, in the interests of honesty and full disclosure, you want to mention these things in advance, okay? Now, that's a great sentiment. It shows that you have, a sense of ethics. I would assume you to be a more honest, open person, which is great. However, that kind of thing acts totally against you. And especially if it's at an early stage, like if this is your first interview, you go down for an interview and it's your first interview. The problem is that they're probably going to eliminate you based on this, and that's it. You're done. It's technically possible to maybe bring up some mitigating things like this, but only towards the end of the process. So if it's like a process where you have to do 2 interviews, right? You go down to the interview, you pass, you get to the next stage, you go down to the second interview, you pass, then they send you an offer, right? During the offer stage, if it's a really big deal to you, it is possible at that stage to bring up things and say, I just want to make sure this is not going to be an issue, right? It may be possible to do it then, because by that stage, they've gotten to know you, they've seen your value, and they've invested some time, and they have something at stake because they've made you an offer, right? So that means, put it this way, there's a lot of things at stake for the recruiter and possibly the hiring manager when you get to that stage. If you throw the offer back in their face and you say, absolutely not, this is insulting, the amount of money you're going to pay me, no deal, something like that. It's painful for them at that stage. It's embarrassing. It's cost them some time. It may have cost them some money, right? Doing background checks and things on you only to have you throw the offer back. So when they give you an offer, generally speaking, they're wanting you to accept, okay? They're not like, they don't take this attitude that like, oh, it doesn't matter to us. It's like, no, they want you to accept. They've invested time and effort into you. And if you say no or it falls through, it's painful for them. Okay. So that's maybe when you can bring up stuff like this if it's a big deal, but I would not recommend it. Okay. Get the job, like get it, start work, or at least like get the written approved offer in your hand. And then worry about things like this, right? Because if they don't offer you the job, what does any of this matter? It doesn't matter, right? So that would be my recommendation. Mark says, hey. Hey, Mark. Okay, so Shadia says, I was terminated from my last job. I'm sorry to hear that, Shadia. And I put it on my job application because it asked why I left my last job. The recruiter brought it up in my phone interview. Am I eliminated? Well, I can't answer that. Not necessarily. It's not an ironclad rule that you would be. But if you've already disclosed this on an application and then they called you, that tends to suggest that what you wrote on your application did not eliminate you. So if you gave the full legitimate reason on your application, and on the phone call, you didn't really add any new major information, I would say probably not. Like it probably didn't eliminate you by saying this on the phone call. That would be how I would assess this. Anime says I should lie more on my resume in interviews. Everyone else does it. Well, no. No, you shouldn't, because it's not going to get you ahead. Do they exaggerate? Yes. Can you exaggerate and get away with it? Of course. Can you selectively mention the good things about you and make sure you don't mention the bad things about you? Of course. Now, is that lying? No. Some people would call that lying. They would say, that's a lie of omission. Well, okay. Who am I to tell you you're wrong? But put it this way, it's what salespeople do, right? Like that's how you promote something. If I want to persuade you that, this might be a good thing for you to do, I'm probably going to tell you the good things about it. And if there are any bad things, I'll probably either not mention them or I'll really downplay them, right? Now, does that constitute a lie? I'll leave that up to you. Okay. But the reality is that that's how you do sales, right? You mention the good points, right? If you come up to someone and say, you could buy this, I'm selling this, but you probably don't want to because some people find that it doesn't solve their problem and some other people don't like it. And I've heard someone on the internet once said that it sucked. So I don't know. But, you can if you want, I suppose. Bye. Is that a way to promote something? No. Now, what you're actually doing, and this is where you can go take a nice cleansing cold shower afterwards, is you're selling yourself. That's what a job interview is. What you're trying to do is you're trying to persuade the interviewer to forget about every other candidate and instead hire you, right? Now, every other candidate is different from you. They have a different combination of skills, education, traits, right? Accomplishments, right? Now, who's to say one's better than the other? I'll leave that up to you. Also, who's to say what would be a better fit for these people? They have very specific ideas of what they're looking for based on logical theories or insane theories. They have decided they're looking for a certain thing, right? So what you're there to do is simply to sell yourself. You're going to make the strongest case for yourself. Here's why you might want to hire me. I got this, I got this, I got this. I could do this for you. I could do that for you. I could do this for you. Right? You shouldn't have to lie. I'm being honest. I'm not saying this out of some sense of like humanistic altruism or whatever. I'm saying this in all honesty, right? The fact that they saw your resume and then invited you down for an interview, that proves you don't have to lie about something. They think you're qualified, right? You know what I mean? And a common thing, this is common knowledge. If you're submitting resumes and you're trying to get interviews, something that's well known is you want to essentially rewrite your resume using their lingo. So if they said, we're looking for this, 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 and this, What you'd like to submit is you'd like to submit a resume that mentions those 4 things, mentions them very prominently and upfront, and doesn't water it down by mentioning 287 other things that are not what they're asking for, right? And that dramatically increases your odds of them calling you in for an interview, right? You know, let's say they use a different word to describe the same thing. You use this word to describe it, right? I was a supervisor. They use a different word. We're looking for someone who has a lead hand. Is it a lie to scratch out the word supervisor on your resume and use the word lead hand because that's the term they're using? In reality, across different industries, it pretty much is a synonym, right? You know? So the word lie, you know, there's an obvious line that, you know, that you would cross, but before you get to that line, it's a matter of interpretation of what is a lie. So that's what I have to say about that. You cough. Okay, so Anime says you coughed. Oh no, that's a dead giveaway. That's a sign you're not a go-getter. I'm sorry, the position has been filled. Thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, we're going in a different direction. So that's something that you've heard, and that's something you're likely to hear. I agree, and it's the sign of a royal jackass who you want to steer clear of and not work for. I don't think you need me to tell you that. You know, the fact that you're mentioning it suggests to me that you've already come to that conclusion, and congratulations, you're right. If you're still getting over the fact that people that often do recruitment, especially in large enterprise, don't know what they're doing and don't know how to accurately assess somebody, especially at the worker level, you're absolutely correct. Most of these people don't have a clue what they're doing. And the methods that they use to try and make decisions among candidates have been shown with data over many years to be completely flawed. The only problem is that the reason why we still use these across the board is because there's no practical alternative without dramatically increasing the amount of work you'd have to do and the amount of time you'd have to spend. So that's why they still do it. It's like I said in a recent live stream, it's like with performance reviews. You know, every year your boss has to do a performance review with all their employees, all their direct reports. They bring you into their office or whatever, and they tell you how they think you're doing, right? And this is an official kind of thing. They've got to do at least once a year. That's what I'm talking about. Performance reviews. They've also been shown to be gloriously ineffective. And it's been shown across the board that over 90% of all people, all employees, whether they're the workers having them done on them or the bosses, the managers that have to do them, everybody hates doing them and finds them completely ineffective, right? It's the same with job interviews. This has been shown through data. You know, you don't have to take my word for it. You go do some research. So yeah. And that's why I said at the beginning of the live stream that there's many different ways of getting a job. This is one of them, and it's not even the most popular. LFI says, "Hi, Bill. Great to see you live." Well, thank you. It's great to see you live, too. Sorry, maybe off topic. What do you think about a cover letter? Not every application asks for it, but what would you suggest to stand out? Well, you know what? The problem with cover letters is that everybody's got their own idea of what they are and what they're for. There's no real need for them in the internet age. What they used to be this thing that, you know, if you took an envelope and you put your resume inside and you mailed that to somebody, when they receive it, they open this envelope and they get a resume and they're like, what's this? I don't know the person that sent this. What's this for? Right? So the cover letter explains like, I'm sending you my resume because I'm trying to apply for this position. You know, here's why I think this, you know, like a couple of reasons why I think it's appropriate for me to do this. And here's what I'm expecting. You know, if you have any questions, please let me know. Here's my contact information. Other than that, I hope you will consider calling me in for an interview, right? That explains this thing you just sent to them, right? Now, in this day and age, do you really need to do that? No, you don't have to do it for an online job application because you press a button on an online form that says submit, and they already know what the hell it is, right? If you send an email, you might attach your resume, and then the cover letter would be the body of the email saying, please find my resume attached. I'm trying to apply for this job. Let me know. Best regards, right? But people come up with retarded sort of alternate things that they say. They say, I want a cover letter. It has to be 3 pages. You have to tell me all about your personality and your psychological makeup and your ambitions and your, details of your extended family, and all this kind of stuff. And you know what I mean? Like, so there's no real rhyme or reason. It just becomes an extension of the resume. And especially right now, people are using AI to do the heavy lifting for writing these things. So, all you do is you look at whatever that company or employer has stated, they're looking for, right? That's the best you can do. Other than that, the only thing I would do is I would list in the letter at the beginning, I would say, I'm sending it. Let's say it's an email where you're sending in an application. You would say, I'm applying for this role. I have, and then maybe a short list in point form, 5 years in this skill, this education, this accomplishment, blah, blah. Right. So that's why I consider this a great opportunity for me, and show a little bit of passion. I'm really excited to see where this goes because my ambition is to work in this area. If you should need anything, let me know. Other than that, thank you. Have a great day. Something like that. Right. One thing that you don't get in a resume is a sample of how professional you are, what your communication skills are like. So if you wrote a letter that said, that demonstrated really good manners, you were very professional, but yet you were very personable, something like that would be adding something. So you could do a lot worse than to do that. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe we'll do a thing on cover letters sometime soon. Horseflesh says, thanks. I'll tell them to keep it in their back pocket. Much respect, contents, but you're welcome, Horseflesh. Anime says, I appreciate the input. Amazing answer, sir. Please excuse my cough message. Just a joke. Thank you. Yeah, no fun allowed. Just kidding. Not a problem, Anime. And I did get that. But it brings up a really valid point. And that is that, you encounter a ton of incompetence and unprofessionalism when you're engaged in applying for a job. Like if you're dealing with recruiters, yes, there are a couple of really good recruiters out there. But unfortunately, a hell of a lot of them are unprofessional, they're rude, they're incompetent. And the beauty of their job also is that people rarely call them on it because everyone that's dealing with them, at least that they don't work with, everyone on the public side, is having to ingratiate themselves to them. And they take full advantage of this. So they behave in a totally unacceptable way a lot of the time and nobody says anything, Mickey9 says, hello, Bill. How have you been? I've been in the different time zones. So you've been to the different time zones, have you? Yes, I had a holiday down in the different time zones, and it was interesting. What with the astral plane and whatnot. I'm glad to be here. Well, welcome back, Mickey9. I remember you from before. So thanks for joining us. Anime says, yeah, my most recent interview had them reach out to me 2 weeks later at 4:59 p.m. on a Friday. Bullet dodged, yeah. Yeah, they think it's fine. I've said this before, I'll say it again, not to sound like a broken record, but it just is funny to me how in the sales department, this is not universal, but the general rule is you've got to communicate properly with customers and potential customers, especially in business to business type operations. Like you have to treat them like kings and queens, You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't say something unprofessional or rude or, silly, or off the cuff in your official communication to a customer or a potential customer. You're representing the company. Has to be very well done. They will not tolerate people messing with that. But yet in the HR department, you look how recruiters communicate with the public, with candidates. It's totally unprofessional. It's rude. It really represents the organization in a very negative light a lot of the time. And we're just sort of fine with this. I don't really get it, but whatever. If you want to explore this further, join me later today. I got another live stream where we bitch about this stuff and we talk about it. And sometimes we talk about what's going on the other side that leads to this kind of behavior and stuff. So join me for that. It's called Honest HR Nitrous. Yeah. Okay, so we covered some questions. Now let's get to the topic that's the title of this episode, which is how to introduce yourself. That's why a lot of you guys might be here, I imagine. Let's talk about this. You go to a job interview. We're talking about mainly the scenario where you're in a job interview and you get to the interview and they say, please introduce yourself, right? What do you say? Okay, now the thing about these highly general questions is that everybody's got a different recommendation on how you respond to it. You could ask 100, advisors or whatever, what you should say, and they'll give you 100 different answers. Let me give you my sort of recommendation. First of all, when you get to the job interview, people have commented about, you have to make a good first impression. So, you need to dress the part, you need to groom yourself professionally. You need to smile. Now, for a lot of you introverts out there, a lot of people got this down, but a lot of people don't. Your natural face might kind of be like this. I don't look particularly happy. Just kind of, neutral. Now, the other thing is that if you go to, say, a job interview, you're usually nervous, you're usually uncomfortable. Excuse me, you're out of your comfort zone. And so, unless you're really consciously thinking about it, your facial expression can show your feelings. So you go there and you look stressed and uncomfortable and like you're hating every minute of it. And you look like, you're nervous, So when they say smile, if you've heard that before, what they just mean is try and look pleasant. You don't have to really, dial it to 10. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to do any of that, the brilliant $1 million smile, ding. You don't have to do that. All it means is look approachable, right? Just try and I'm trying to look pleasant now. I'm trying to, look like I'm in a good mood, like I'm enjoying doing this and I'm enjoying what's going on, right? I don't know if I'm succeeding, but it's better than looking like that. You understand? So people have talked about that kind of stuff in response to this question. They talk about how you dress, how you groom yourself, how you your body language, right? Try and reasonably sit up straight. And then if you shake hands or do chest bumps or however you greet people in a professional situation, do that stuff properly, appropriately. And, they talk about all that stuff. So, I'm assuming that everybody knows this, okay? And this is an interview. They've invited you in, okay? And it's the opening question. Instead of saying, tell me about yourself, which is kind of the standard opening question for a lot of interviews, they'll say, please introduce yourself. You see how easy it is to be a recruiter? You don't even have to come up with your own questions. You just ask the same crap that everybody asks, right? Totally artificial. Nobody talks like this ever when they're speaking freely to their friends, right? But they talk like this to you. Now, if you were in different situations, if you were in a classroom type situation, there's 30 of you there, you may respond differently, okay? There's no one blanket answer to this. But if you're in a job interview, one method of answering this is just you treat it like they asked you, tell me about yourself. It's the same question. And my recommendation for how to answer, tell me about yourself, is 3 parts. You may have heard this before. It's the most popular video on my channel, so I don't know if you've seen it. But the first thing you say is, well, as you can see from my resume, now that's actually optional. It's more of a memory jog for you, but you could start off with actually saying that. Well, as you can see from my resume, and then you go down your resume, you do a summary of your resume in about 45 seconds. So just the very basic Cliff's Notes. I worked here for 5 years in this role, then I worked here for 5 years in that role. Before that, I had, education. I have this educational credential, And what you want to do is you want to do it in reverse chronological order. So you start with the oldest stuff, or no, that's chronological order. You start with the oldest stuff, and then you work your way to the present. So you end with your most recent job, and then you say, and that's what brings me here today, and why I'm excited to learn more about this position or this job. Okay, so it's like 3 parts. Well, as you can see from my resume, then you summarize your resume in 45 seconds, going from oldest to newest. Start with your education, and then your experience, oldest to newest. So that brings you up to your most recent job, and then you say, and that's what brings me here today, and why I'm excited to learn more about this position. Okay, there's all kinds of reasons for this. Number one, you don't want to take up a ton of time on this question. This is an introductory question. It's an icebreaker. You don't want to be sitting there for 10 minutes talking about something you did 10 years ago that nobody gives a rat's ass about. Okay, so brief, right? You're not there to talk about the past necessarily. You're talking about what you can do for them and why you're awesome. That's a different thing. So you want to get off this question quickly and bring them to talk about this position. The reason I'm here is to talk about this job. Let's get into it. Here's how I kick ass at this type of role, and here's what I can do for you. Okay? What's actually going on with this question is that a lot of the time, recruiters, they have a meeting, and they have a job interview to do, and it's with you. And maybe they've had back-to-back job interviews with different candidates for different jobs all day. And they really haven't done any homework right before the interview to even take like a couple of minutes to like look at your application and look at your resume. So a lot of the time, you come down to the interview, they see on their schedule, they have an interview with John Doe, so they know your name, but they have no idea who you were. They have no idea anything on your resume, or, they've forgotten. They look at resumes and things all day long. They sit talking to candidates all day long. They can't remember which one you were. So that's usually the reason why they ask this question, is because they don't know anything about you by the time the meeting starts. They shake your hand, they sit down at the table, and they're waiting for you to like give them a basic overview of who you are, right? So it actually does, ironically, serve a function to ask this question a lot of the time. Okay, I mean, that's obviously not universal, but that happens a lot more than you think. Okay, so that's why if you answer that way, that can make a lot of sense. Another answer, the only other answer I'm going to give to this is, you could say this answer in a job interview. It could also be in other situations also. So it could be in a networking type situation. You meet somebody at an event or in the hall, or, whatever, someone introduces you. Right. And they ask you, please introduce yourself, or, something like this. There's another way of doing it. This is more for networking type situations, but you could also do this in a job interview. It works perfectly fine. And I've done a video on this, and this is where you say 4 things. Okay. East Coast. And it's a lot quicker, but this is the things you would say. Okay, so the first thing you'd say is your name. So you'd say, "Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is," and then your name, right? Mr. X. Like whatever you call yourself. The Midnight Bastard. Whatever your name is, and then you would give your tagline. Now, if you don't know what a tagline is, this is like your brand. It's if you have a LinkedIn profile, it's that little field under your name. It's kind of like what you identify as. So you could say, I'm an accountant, or, I'm a fully qualified mountaineer, right? Or I'm an biologist, right? I don't know what that is, but if that's you, you say that, and their mouths will be agape with just how impressed they are, right? So your tagline, it's who you are, right? Now, for some people, this can be a bit challenging, because let's say you're kind of a generalist. You've worked as an accountant for a couple of years, but then you sort of changed careers and now you're a teacher, but you also fly aircraft as your hobby, so you're a fully qualified pilot. So how do you summarize that? You're an accountant and a teacher and a pilot. Like, if you were to say that, people would probably be confused as to who the hell you are, right? But if you say something like, I'm a student, I'm a nursing student, or I am a fully qualified engineer, or I have an accounting degree, it's like, okay, that's who you are. That's who you are to me. It makes perfect sense. You've just graduated with a degree in architecture, right? That's your tagline. That's who you are, right? If you're going for a job and the job is for, I don't know, supervisor of, sewerage treatment attendants in the Department of Public Works for your municipal government, right? Something like that. That's the title or whatever. You could say that as your tagline. Like a position can be your tagline if that's who you are. And it also looks like you're fully qualified to do this job if that's how you introduce yourself. So don't go down for an interview for that job and then say, when they say, please introduce yourself, you say, hi, I'm Bill. I'm a fully qualified pilot. You understand? Right? Okay, so that's the first two things. So the first thing is you say, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is your X, whatever your name is. And then the second thing you say is your tagline. Okay? I'm a student. I'm a civil engineer, whatever you are. Okay? The third one, and this is my recommendation, is you say what problem you solve. Okay? So if you've introduced yourself as someone who's recently graduated with a degree in architecture, you say, I specialize in this particular type of architecture, right? Or if you've had a job recently, you'd say, I specialize in this particular thing, right? Okay. So it's the problem you solve. Now, I'm just looking at my notes here, okay? What I've written down from the last time I had to answer this. Basically, if you can mention the requirements of the job in there, you'll get bonus points. So if they're looking for a civil engineer that has experience doing this particular type of work, if you say, well, I specialize in doing that particular type of work, that really helps, okay? The example I'd written down here is that you would say something like, I have over 15 years experience helping to design the most cost-effective, energy-efficient, and flexible commercial buildings available. Something like that. That's the problem you solve. And if you're going for a job where you have to do that, that's perfect. And then finally, once again, you say the last thing, which is you direct their attention to this thing that you're here to talk about. I'm excited to learn about this current opportunity. Something like that. Okay? Or I'm excited. What I have written is I'm excited about the opportunity to bring my skills and abilities to this role. Something like that. Right? So 4 things: your name, your tagline, the problem you solve, and then you conclude and you direct their attention to this thing that you've come here to talk about. I'm excited to learn about this opportunity. I'm excited to learn how I can bring my talents to help you in this situation. Something like that, right? And that's a great way to introduce yourself. It gives them a lot of information that they're wanting to hear. It makes a good first impression. It frames the discussion, and it brings the topic to the thing you want to talk about, which is like how you are awesome and you're the person that they should hire, right? And it doesn't waste a lot of time. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's go back to questions. I see there's 23 people here. You guys are awesome. Some people were asking some stuff. Jupiter says, I interviewed someone last week and they took 7 actual minutes to answer it. Exhausting. Yeah, I mean, it depends what you asked, right? You know, the other thing is that for people who are answering the questions here, right, what can be helpful is you don't talk for minutes in a continuous block where they can't get a word in edgeways, right? You kind of put little pauses in there, just, you know, I don't know the exact amount of time, but just, you know, some, so it isn't overwhelming, right? And it allows them to jump in and say like, oh, you know, how did that work? Or, you know, when did you do that? Or how, you know, something like that. Or they have the opportunity to sort of say, okay, great. Another thing I was wondering was, and then they ask you another question, right? You know, it's when someone pulls a Bill Todd and they just, you know, answer in one solid block of text that goes on forever. It can be, like you said, exhausting, overwhelming. So get in the chat. Let me know if you have any questions about what we're talking about today, how to introduce yourself. You know, what are your strengths, or anything else you're wondering about in the world of making money, really, like getting employment, the methods of getting employment, job interviews, recruiters, hiring managers, networking, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. My mission is to get you employed. So whatever you're struggling with, let me know. I see there's now 26 people here, so thank you all once again for joining me. Yeah, and later this afternoon, as I said, I am doing a live stream called Honest HR Nitrous, where we talk a bit about the stupidity of this entire process and some of the psychological effects that this has on people, the reasons for it, what you can do about it, people that are just not having a good time with this process and experiencing a lot of frustration. And I don't blame you. I mean, I think some of the worst encounters of my life have been job interviews. You know, people that you're already feeling low and, you know, you feel about this tall, and then you get treated in this kind of incompetent, disrespectful way by these clowns, you know, and it's very painful to have to deal with them. And, you know, what you'd like to do is you'd like to end all interaction with them, because that's what you profoundly feel, but, you know, you have to persist. Most business encounters, you know, people are generally, like, especially manager stuff, you know, at least in my experience here, they're very, very professional, you know, very good communication skills, very polite, you know, this kind of thing. And, you know, it's not what you see when you go for job interviews. I have memories of, you know, my earlier career, you know, going for a lot of these interviews. Some of them were just nightmares. So that's kind of, you know, what I have in mind when people talk about some of this stuff. Okay, get in the chat. Give me some questions. If I don't get any questions, I'll be wrapping this up. I'm going to see if I can make my camera a bit brighter, because I'm using a manual setup here, like all professional people do. I'm very low tech. The computer that I'm doing this on I built myself like 13 years ago. So it's really quite obsolete now. But that being said, I think there's some companies out there that are making really crappy software that doesn't work very well. And that's a lot of the reasons for some of the imperfections on some of the stuff I do. I'm using Streamlabs to stream this, and I'm really not impressed with Streamlabs. Lots of bugs. Mickey9 says, yes, I got hired thanks to your videos and live streams. I truly appreciate it, Bill. Well, that's great to hear, Mickey9. Thanks for the feedback. I'm actually surprised that you're back here. Usually once people get hired, they're gone and they never come back. It's interesting because there's a lot of people talking about sort of the lower level stuff, like how to do basic job interviews and how to answer the basic questions and things like this. What I enjoy doing is talking about more higher level stuff, but there's a limited demand for that stuff. A lot of people still really want to cover, the basic stuff. So I oblige when I can. Okay, there's not a lot of questions coming. So as I said, if I don't get any in the next few seconds, I'll probably wind this down. In 1 hour's time, I'll be back with a live stream called Honest HR Nitrous. It's something new I'm trying. I'm trying to keep it a bit more real than I have done traditionally. YouTube is kind of interesting. You don't get a lot of business type people like managers and things on YouTube. And if I was currently working, like running a business operation, I wouldn't be able to be on YouTube. There's no way you can. It would be so fake. It would be just corporate stuff. The reason I can do this is because I'm no longer a manager. I've sort of left that world behind. And now I talk about it, and you can speak more freely when A, you're not doing it, and B, you have no intention of going back to do it. So, and I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, something like that. And over time, I've sort of gotten a little bit more comfortable with it, able to speak a little bit more freely about things. Still can't name names, but, can talk about experiences and things. So the live stream I'm doing in an hour is, it's yet another step down that path where we're being honest about things, because there's a lot of misinformation on YouTube, and there's a lot of BS about this kind of stuff, Oscar says, hi, Bill. On Monday, I got my job offer. I'll be starting next Monday. Well, congratulations, Oscar. That's great to hear. And I'm sure you're over the moon. Very gratifying. Good stuff. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks to the people that are here. You guys are awesome. Thank you for the intelligent questions we got. As I say, stick around. I'll be back in an hour where we're going to sort of break new ground and go from there. Oscar says, remember me? I was the one telling you I got fired because I went to HR about a false accusation made by my boss. Yes, I vaguely remember something about that. I'm glad that it worked out. That's really good. Okay, take care, everyone. You guys are awesome. Check out my courses if you do want to go deeper. If you're having issues with getting hired, check out that course. There's a link in the description. All my advice, one place, templates, step by step. If you're wanting to learn business, that's after all my core competency. I've run business operations and all this kind of stuff. I've advised startups and small business and individuals. So I created this as like a real bang for the buck resource for people who want to learn business, but don't have the time to take a couple years off and go back to school or pay 5 figures for it to go to university. They just want the knowledge. The knowledge has been out there for a very long time. So check that out. That can be a real solution for you. Whether you want to start a side hustle or your own business, or you want to just be more effective in your job, maybe move up into management. So knowing business really helps. Check that out. And for those of you who are really ambitious and you want to move into upper management, that course there is for enhancing your communication skills at a higher level. It's called Write Like a Professional. I'm still not super happy with that title. It's not just about how to write, it's about what to say. So how you communicate in different situations and how you convey to people that you're you've got a lot of value. You really know what you're doing simply by your written communication. So check that out if that's of any interest to you. Links in the description. I'll be back later. You guys are awesome. I'll see you soon. Take care.